Hello, family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I am your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. So, overview today, Jordan Neely. I'll remind you about who he is in case you forgot. The Oligarchy, which is what I should have mentioned yesterday, and I'm using heavy air quotes right now, parental rights. Okay, we're going to get into that one. Right before then, some quick hits. Free birth control, not just for the rats, not just for the rats of New York City. The Biden administration has proposed a rule to make over-the-counter birth control free. Maybe get on that sooner than later, my guy. You're almost out the door, and I'm not sure if I mean life or the presidency. So, do some cool shit before you go. Just a shout out for voter guides, right? Don't forget to have a look. NPR's got some great breakdowns. Democracy Now! This is a moment to really remember local elections and bills to stay really involved and on top of. And the Oligarchy. Yesterday, I told you I was a little bit nuts. I got home and I was just like, damn you to hell. Why didn't you think of the word oligarchy? That was the whole point, right? So from yesterday's episode, I talked about the fact that Musk has spent tens of millions of dollars trying to get Donald Trump elected. And I know it's so obvious, but take a second to consider the fact that two billionaires are nakedly, right, arm in arm, like the ugliest porno you can possibly imagine. Just as a rule, we all know gay porn is like top notch, right? Two dudes, but can you imagine those two soggy diapers? Absolutely not. I would pass on that every day. I never thought in my life that I could get more gay. And here we are. Just a thought. Just two corpulent skin tags, just like rub it up against each other. Just gross. Anyway, they're buying the election. A little bit of backstory just on campaigns finance laws. I had to remind myself, right, about the string of Supreme Court decisions, right? Think Citizens United, which loosened restrictions on dark money, right? So that means that how money is flooded into politics, flooded into campaigns, and where it comes from, well, it's a lot harder to track, and the waters are very muddy, and that's on purpose, right? Where it's like what we're seeing is just this disgusting, ugly lottery game where there's a lucrative incentive for really low-level Republican voters to register. In a perfect world, it would look, the incentivization to register to vote would be, having a very robust, healthy democracy, a very strong public educational system, and just a sense of, care, maybe like healthcare, for example. These are things that make people want to be involved in their political realities and to engage in their democracy, but that's not going to happen in one such as America, where half the time you say democracy and there's a wry twist that's happening in one's mouth, or you're using air quotes yourself, but this is the oligarchy that Bernie Sanders talked about, and I remember that being a point more than a few years ago now, where people were really using the term. And then we stopped using the term. I don't know if it's because it's clunky, or if it's too much like fascism, or we're just like, well, it sounds too extreme, but that's literally what we're dealing with and what we're headed towards, right? We don't have enough, checks and balances on power when it comes to billionaires and rampant corporate and rampant spending through things like PACs, which we're seeing with Elon Musk. Anyway, gross. I'm so sorry this whole concept is gross. Musk is gross, Trump is gross, and I'm so sorry I put the idea of them together in your brain. But also, did you not think of nuggets in a deep fryer? I did. Maybe it's because of Trump. That's what I thought. All right. Quick update on this race. It is tight between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I'd love to tell you that it's not. They're both vying now for support in the Sun Belt regions. But I will tell you one thing that made me laugh a little bit, and it's like laughing like I just want to grab just like these like cargo short wearing golf playing losers by the necks. I can't even think of who they are, but this tidbit out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania made me laugh. So it's a swing state, very heavily contested region. And I didn't understand, maybe because I'm non-American, but also I don't live in a swing state, and so this is for non-swing state people too, how much political junk mail they're getting, like snail mail. Like, it's being delivered to battleground residents, like to their home, and the vast majority of them are coming from Republican groups or dark money groups aligned with the Trump campaign. And it's like, this is what you're spending money on, you fucking losers. So sorry, guys, but like Mint, it's spelled with 2 T's, is a company that tracks direct mail, and they say that it's collected 14,000 different mail cards, right? So that's currently about 1,000 new ones a day that have gone to millions of households in 9 swing states. So through September, remember that September was just last month, right? It just happened. About 96% of them were pro-Donald Trump or anti-Kamala Harris. So they're spending money sending, postcards and pamphlets to Americans that don't want them. Democrats are starting to catch up, according to, I believe this is either Washington Post or the New York Times. But 4 out of 5 mailers still come from Republicans, and many of them are going to Democratic neighborhoods. But it's just like, to the Democrats, I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't start. All I get is just screenshots from my friends about how many times Kamala Harris is asking them for money, and I'm like, I what's the word that I get triggered. I'm like, don't send me a screenshot of another black person asking for money. I'm joking, you guys. This is just ridiculous, though. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? With snail mail, with postcards, with what era are we in? But this is the part that really gets me. Like, most people communicate by phone, which is why the Democrats have typically been sending text messages, but political consultants still believe that direct mail is more engaging and substantial than an overflowing email box. I'm like, yeah, that's what makes people happy. Like, replace an overflowing email box with an overflowing mailbox, right? Here's the thing that pisses me off. It's largely in black neighborhoods in southwestern Philadelphia. So for that particular state, it's primarily black folks. And the thing that gets me is that the vast majority of pamphlets and postcards or whatever that they're getting, these black folks in Philadelphia, are all about fear of crime, right? So it's targeting neighborhoods where they're just like, you should be afraid of you. Like, that's literally what these postcards are saying. Like, did you know that you moved in 3 years ago and things got really intense? Did you know that? You're sending mail to people's house, to black people's house. That's like, there goes the neighborhood, and you're blaming them for doing it. And the thing that drives me nuts, right, is like these pamphlets, or what do we even call snail mail? Flyers? Is that the word people use for those? The flyers, right? They are spending so much time trying to falsely persuade these like regular American folks that they're in grave danger of being shot in the street. I'm like, by each other? What is going on here, right? And they make the threats explicit. This is what they say. Crime is rising. Pennsylvanians are less safe. That's what one mailer that was sent out by Securing American Greatness. What a loser name. SAG. That's the acronym. SAG. Yeah. Like, come on, right? Like ball and sock testicles. That's how low. This is called low-hanging fruit. Get it together. This is a dark money group, right? And again, that means that the contributions don't have to be disclosed, right? This is the guy who's running it is named Taylor Budowick, a former spokesperson and senior advisor to Trump. So it includes claims that Pennsylvania crime is up in double digits and that the state has one of the country's most dangerous cities, according to the FBI. Here's the funny thing. Of course, it doesn't mention that in Philadelphia, where these mailers are being sent, right, violent crimes in 2023 were at their lowest level in a decade, right? In a decade. So this is post-pandemic. This city is not even top, like one of the top most dangerous places compared with other cities. Think of Washington, think of Cleveland or whatever, if we're looking at homicides only, and even then, those numbers can be complicated because these things are way more complex than we can see on just paper. But even statewide, the violent crime rate in Pennsylvania has declined significantly. Another mailer sent to the same neighborhoods by the state Republican Party also makes similar claims that are false or misleading on the economy. So here's the thing. The typical family of four, right, under Trump got a $2,000 tax cut. This is what it says. But if you follow the footnote on this flyer / pamphlet, whatever the fuck these things are called, it leads not to an independent source, which is what one should expect, one being quoted something like that, or, when you're looking at empirical data, it should come from an independent kind of source. No, if you follow the footnote, right, it takes you to a Trump White House news release, which says that's how much a family making $75,000 received. When actually, according to the Tax Policy Center, which is a nonpartisan authority, a family in that economic range received on average about $930 in tax cuts, which is basically nothing at all. So the mailer never mentions also that white Americans got 80% of the benefits from that tax law, while black Americans got about 5%. So there you go. There you go. Just mailboxes just full of lies. Honestly, that's what I think about when I think of pamphlets. And I think of flyers. I'm like, do we look at those? Am I missing out on snail mail? Is there something really amazing in there that I'm not sure about? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know, because I don't want to see that. I can't deal with that. I don't check mail and I don't check my voicemail. That's just how we go. So send them to snail mail jail is what I'll say. Anyway, on to more, serious matters than the existential threat of our election. I want to talk to you a little bit about Jordan Neely. Now, some of you might remember him, some of you might not, but this was the young man, black man, who was strangled to death by one Daniel Penny on the subway. So I'll refresh your memory. So Jordan Neely was known among subway riders, right? He was a busker for his moonwalking. He did a lot of Michael Jackson impersonations, and just generally, he's been struggling with homelessness, mental illness, drug addiction. But there were people who knew him very well, and who, his family members say, he was a good kid, a good guy, who just struggled because of some of his history, which I'll tell you about in a second. So to refresh your memory, on May 1st, 2023, witnesses to that event said that Jordan Neely had been acting erratically on the F train in Manhattan, that when he entered the train, he was shouting that he was hungry and fed up, before removing his jacket and aggressively whipped it on the floor. This is a freelance journalist, Juan Alberto Vasquez, who recorded the incident in the fatal chokehold. Other witnesses said he'd been demanding money while making what they perceived to be threats, such as, quote, someone is going to die today, and that he was ready to go to Rikers and ready to do life. Keep in mind, right, that he was articulating these things, but he wasn't actually threatening anyone physically. There was also there was no weapon at all, right? None of that was a thing. None of that was a factor. So when this happened, Daniel Penny, I think he was about 25 years old at that time, he put Jordan Neely into a chokehold, right, for over 3 minutes while two other people helped hold him down. And Jordan flailed and fought for his life. And he died. The death was ruled a homicide caused by compression of the neck. So there's no doubt about it. He died because, right? He died because Daniel Penny put him in a chokehold and killed a 30-year-old black man. And yes, Daniel Penny is white. Many people hailed Daniel Penny as a good Samaritan, right? That not all of it was as racially charged as you'd think. A lot of people said, I want to be on the subway. I don't want to be harassed. This guy was loud and bothersome, and Daniel Penny did the right thing. That's a good Samaritan. Other people, right, said that this is white vigilantism. for anyone who's like, maybe this isn't as racially charged as we're inclined to believe, I want to remind you of what, because this is the thing. We live in a society that is charged by racism. It's politically charged. It's very, very serious. But I know that a lot of the times what somebody thinks is like they're not always, racism on the surface. A lot of the time it's racism below the surface. But here's the thing. I listened to Daniel Penny, right? This is a guy who was discharged by the military. I'm not entirely sure why, but he was there. He spent a few years there. Thank you so much. This is me trying to haphazardly plug in my MacBook before it goes because I need my little notes. But anyway, here's what happened. Daniel Penny is talking to reporters. He's talking to journalists. They're asking him, why did you do this? The police came. And his justification for it was that he called Jordan Neely a crackhead. And then showed there's the technique he used to restrain him, right? And this is according to recorded statements by the Associated Press. So I want to bring that to everyone's attention. That word that he used, crackhead, how charged that word is, how racially charged, how hideous. The fact that it was used as a justification, that to me tells me everything I need to know. I'm not a person who's like very much into what if isms. It's not something that I think is particularly useful. What if he was white, or what if this was that? I think we have enough information to understand how something like this could happen. We live in a society that does not treat people who struggle with mental illness well, right? We look down on homeless people. We don't know how to address either of those situations in any meaningful way. So was this a racist incident or not? And to me, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It was a racially charged one, no matter how you slice or dice it. But the particular use of that word, right? I usually, just to let you into my brain a little bit, when I read something, rather than look for something to affirm what my initial reaction typically is, I will often look to the other side and create an argument against what I'm saying. I couldn't create an argument against the use of the term crackhead, right? This was a flag, right? It was a flag that white people are trained to do, many of them in this country, on how to defend themselves when they treat black people wrongly. So think of every time you've seen a video of this person harassing, a white person harassing a single black person, a group of black kids, a black kid, whoever, black women, black men, it doesn't really matter. And the thing that they say is that they were being violent or that they threatened me, and how inclined police are to believe it. Think again of when police attack unarmed black men, for example, and black women. They could literally be sleeping in a car and an officer can say, I feared for my life. It's in the handbook that happens in this country, where if I flag this, if I say this particular word, these could be people who have black people in their life, although likely not very close, right? That will move to this immediate defense. It's not a coincidence to me that he said crackhead to the police, because it was meant to say I did nothing wrong, and the police were meant to say, oh, okay, well, I've seen this before. I know this. And it's like, I lived amongst crackheads. I lived with them they were in my neighborhood. My mom has been referred to as a crackhead more than a small number of times, even though, she didn't do crack or cocaine or any of those kinds of drugs. It's a word that you use against black people when you want to say that their life doesn't mean much. And whether or not this was used on purpose, it matters less to me. So that court case is about to start. They're choosing a jury. Right now, back in 2023, Penny was arrested last year and then set free on a $100,000 bond. If he's convicted, he will of second-degree manslaughter. He faces up to 15 years in prison, right? And I want you to just get into the mindset of Jordan Neely for a second, right? Because we've talked now a little bit about the psychology of a Daniel Penny, which I honestly think is very typical of how people are trained in America to think about blackness, right? In 2007, when Jordan was a teenager, his mother was strangled to death by her boyfriend, and her body was found in a suitcase in the Bronx. Neely, a teenager back then, testified at the trial, and the person who did it, Sean Sutherland, was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Neely's supporters say his mental health had deteriorated since. That's what his family says as well. Can you believe that? Who would be well under those circumstances? Who would be okay? And to be honest, one doesn't need to have this like unbelievable traumatic event, right? Mental illness is just a thing that happens. It can be onset by trauma, but it could be environmental factors. It could be genetic factors. I've been crazy half the time. So here's the question. Why on earth was the response to put him in a chokehold until he stopped moving? Until he died? How many times have we seen that? When it comes to black people, and of late, black men in particular. And, you know, around this white vigilantism and the people saying this, you know, it was a good Samaritan, I'm sick and tired of being harassed on the subways. If that's the case, right, if that's the case, why not do something about it? Why not do something about the system in which we live? This is the thing that concerns me. I can't believe I have to say this. It's not actually acceptable to kill people because they're loud or annoying. Did you know that? I did. I mean, I would have done myself in a number of times because I am both way too often. It's not even that I forgot, you know, I try to stay on top of these things and follow them, but it's like the calendar, the way that I have a calendar set up in my mind and on literal paper, and I have like 30 different versions of them. There's so much, it's hard to keep up with. As of now, like the jury selection should last about 6 weeks. So in 6 weeks, Daniel Penny will, you know, be in the thick of this trial, and I will be following it just so we're all, you know, staying on top of it. But I just have been trying to wrap my head around how one gets to that place. Because here's my thing. I remember a while ago, do you remember a long time ago, can't remember the year exactly, it was before I think it was before Trump. I want to say it was before Trump. I might be wrong. I can't remember when I was in the UK last. Maybe 2017, actually, so Trump would have been, it doesn't matter, sorry. It was when a couple of bombs went off in Paris, and then there was this massive wave of Islamophobia. It was when everybody had the French flag filter. Remember that? Okay. And so I'm in the UK at the time, and I'm, you know, doing my little movement work and doing my little talk at SOAS or whatever. And in the paper, I read about a Muslim woman getting pushed into an oncoming train. And it was directly, obviously, connected to this rise of Islamophobia. And outside of the immeasurable sadness I felt, right? Just somebody doing their daily commute, just a person just like me and you with all the thoughts and all the worries and all the joys and all the dreams. I thought, nobody just wakes up and decides that they're going to push somebody into an oncoming train, right? Like that's something that's cultivated. It started with a comment. It moved on by cutting that person in line, right? By cutting them down in public. Whatever it is, right? It's in all of these, how you engage online and what fantasies you create, what illusions you create around yourself. But nobody starts out that way. And this is why I think it's so important to not minimize the day in and day out work that we often do that's never seen, never glamorized, never acknowledged, that can be as simple as a no, that's not okay. Because a lot of the time before we know what to say, right? The first thing we know to say is no, that's not okay. And you know what? Sometimes that's enough. It's not okay. It was such a needless death to kill Daniel Penny. It was so unforgivable, and, you know, it makes me sad. It makes me so sad when I think about his life It makes me so sad. He feels like somebody I knew, somebody I could know. And his life was snuffed out before he got to write his own conclusion. So I'll be following up with that case and keeping you in the loop about it. Don't forget Jordan Neely. So now I have the very unfortunate news of bringing you to Idaho very briefly. This is a state that has one of the most stringent and draconian abortion bans in the country. This is the state that every other state wants to base its abortion bans off of, right? But we're not talking specifically about abortion bans today. Oh no. We are talking about the Parental Rights in Medical Decision-Making Act. Yuck. What a mouthful. So this act was passed on party lines and was signed, albeit even with some qualms, by the Republican governor, Brad Little. Even Brad Little was like, I don't know about this one. And yet here we are, it passed. So what is it? What does it mean? The state's new law requires parental permission for nearly all health care a minor receives. It's birth control, gender identity, sex, substances, whatever it is that a young person might want to have a private tete-a-tete with a doctor with. That's not okay anymore. Parents must be in the know. And I cannot emphasize enough how dangerous this is for minors with abusive parents. It just endangers them even further. And I want to be really clear, right, that we're in this moment of, and I'm going to unpack it, but we're in this moment of this really hollow hysteria about the safety of children. And it's typically the safety of children as it pertains to gender identity. And this is what fundamentally demonstrates this whole thing as like just fake outrage, fake news. Let's get into it, right? So, because the outcomes from this are horrific. So this is what proponents of this really stupid act, this is why they think that it is important. So proponents of the law, which technically allows for emergency treatment, I'm about to get into that in a second. Technically, they call it a reasonable step to prevent adolescents from discussing issues such as birth control and gender identity with doctors, counselors, and other adults unless their parents are informed first. They call themselves the parental rights movement, right? This is the group that has pushed book bans in schools and curriculum restrictions, right? These are the folks that do that. Now imagine in this society that we live in, where too many children are literally hungry at schools, they're going into lunch program debt, right? Our public education is on its last legs in a lot of states. That's what you want to focus on? Book bans? You call yourself parental rights movements and your whole thing is on curriculum restrictions and book bans, and we are living in an educational and economic hellfire? This is what you want to... This is why it's a bunch of bullshit. Like, you're not fighting for tax breaks. Let's even go up further, right? Maybe it's like, okay, well, they don't care about children, but they care about being parents, which makes zero sense to me. But they're not even fighting for family tax breaks. They're just fighting school curriculum. What kind of loser behavior is that? Not even the good loser behavior that I call activism, right? Because we care about stuff, and I'm totally that kind of loser. I mean, this is literally loser behavior. It's all about control. It has nothing to do with children, nothing to do with safety, nothing to do with care. It's all about control. It's all about control. And you know what? Many, states limit the autonomy of minors, right? And one thing, just for those of you who are like, maybe haven't listened to all the episodes before, I spend a whole episode debunking the myth that trans identity or gender identity is a real threat to young people, that it leads, like, we've heard hysterical things like, it leads to castration and it does this and that. HRT already exists, not just for adult men like Joe Rogan. It exists for teenagers whose balls don't drop in the right way. Like, we actually have HRT already in a lot of ways. There's also, for people who have, early onset puberty, they use puberty blockers. None of these people are trans, to give the kids some time. Puberty blockers are 100% reversible. All it does is give a young person a chance to mature, either mature the way that they want to, which is, the things grow in the way that they want the things to grow in, or buys them a little time so they could figure out which ways they want the things to grow in. And that's it, because bodies are just a bunch of wobbly bits. It's incredibly embarrassing. And adulthood is just us figuring out how to manage our wobbly bits. And that's it. That's all bodies are. Right? So, young people go to healthcare professionals and they go to counselors to figure out mental health problems, to figure out substance abuse issues, to figure out, how to get contraceptives or how to retrieve treatments for STIs, for example, right? All of this is too permissive for parental rights advocates. And this is what I realized. They're not lying. They say parental rights, but it is just that. It has nothing to do with young people, nothing to do with children, nothing to do with autonomy. And it amazes me that this parental movement is just an extension of a society that doesn't view children and young people as human beings, right? That it's the belief that children need protection from themselves. And it's like, actually, no, they need protection from adults. They need protection from the shit society that we've built. And by the way, there's obviously amazing pockets of resistance everywhere. And I hope we've done a good enough job on this show sort of pointing out what some of those are. But as much as children need protection from actual systemic violence and institutional violence, right? The first threat always to children are adults. And it's in the limits that we put on their imagination and on their autonomy. We put our own restrictions, our own limited beliefs on young people, and that's where they fight. So how is this act working out, by the way? How are we doing? Is everybody doing really well? Are young people up and thriving in fucking Idaho right now? In Boise? How do you say that one? Do you know, Kaden, how to say Boise? It's ridiculous. I mean, all right. Anyway, I want to tell you about a young teen. This story, I believe, is from both the Associated Press and the Washington Post. So, right. A young teen gives birth. She's 13 years old. Idaho's parental consent law snags her care. So she came into the emergency room in a small lakeside town. She was new to the area. She didn't have a doctor, right? This is 13 years old. In most cases, right, there's a physician who is like leading this like pushback against it, Caitlin Gustafson, right? So in most cases, physician Caitlin Gustafson would have begun a pelvic exam to determine whether labor had started or not, right? But instead of doing that, what did she do? She called the hospital's lawyers. That's what they have to do now. Remember when we talked about what was happening? We have a whole episode dedicated to how the legal realities of these abortion bans actually not only needlessly endanger the lives of primarily women who are giving birth or just who are pregnant. I mean, they're dying for no reason, not even in giving birth, just by being pregnant because they can't get access to the right care. The same thing is happening to children now in Idaho, and it's going to expand, right? That's the goal of the GOP. So instead of helping this young person out who's 13 years old and probably fucking scared out of her mind that is pregnant, the first thing that this physician has to do, a woman herself, right, is call the hospital's lawyers. And under this new Idaho law requiring parental consent for nearly all minors' health care, Gustafson could be sued for treating her because the girl had been brought in by her great aunt, not by the immediate parental person or, caregiver. That's right. It's not just any adult. It has to be very specific. So Aaliyah's mother, who was living in a car at the time, and her grandmother, who was the teen's legal guardian, they weren't available. The grandmother was finally able to give verbal consent for the exam from the Boise area jail where she was incarcerated on drug charges. Yes, this is safety. This is what safety looks like for young people. Thank you so much, parental rights movement, you fucking hacks. So, here's the question. What happens if the hospital can't reach the right person on the right time? People die. Children are going to die. Young people die. So this nerve-wracking scene, anytime you think of this young person who's on the brink of something, right, is a reflection of the consequences of a law that physicians, therapists, adolescent advocates, and school officials, and my God, I can't believe I have to say this, and even some law enforcement authorities, even they call it misguided and dangerous. It's another attempt to legislate healthcare in a state where one of the strictest abortion bans already has doctors on edge. You know, it's so amazing to me how this like right-wing nonsense about, you know, we want to limit government oversight, we want to we want to shrink big government, then how come you keep having them in everybody's business? What's wrong with you niggas? You're lying. You don't make any sense. You don't, in your mind is a labyrinth of just like hot air and banana peels. You're just goofballs, just clowns, just running around, just yapping and making absolutely no sense. Critics, right, say the law, which also, this gets me, which also grants parents access to minors' health records. Kaden, how am I doing on time? I don't want to, oh shit, oh, I gotta wrap this. Oh my God, you guys, I have been yapping. I'm trying to be better at this. Okay, so anyway, just to be clear, they get access to health records, which does away with the confidentiality that providers and teen advocates call crucial to building trust and to building autonomy. 3 months after its implementation, so this has gone on, these experts, all of this group that I've mentioned that honestly, under other circumstances would absolutely despise each other, they contend that it's hindering adolescents' ability to access counseling, limiting evidence collection in sexual assault cases, and causing schools to seek parental permission to treat, you know, things like scrapes and ice packs that only need an ice pack or a Band-Aid, right? Just really quickly, in one, a 17-year-old with a hornet allergy was stung by one of them, but was unable to get a new EpiPen from his primary care physician or urgent care because his parents were traveling. By the time he arrived at the hospital, he was in anaphylaxis. That's anaphylactic shock. That means that he almost died. In another case, right, a 16-year-old was treated at an emergency department for a suicide attempt, but the parents refused to allow a follow-up. All that does is isolate that teenager even more, okay? I just this is a terrible reality. It does not keep young people safe. Again, I mentioned that Gustafsson is one of, several folks who are fighting this tooth and nail, fighting these negative effects. So the Washington Post reports that the Idaho Coalition for Safe Healthcare, that is co-led by Gustafsson, has vocally opposed the state's abortion plan and plans to advocate for an exemption to the law for pregnant minors. And folks are looking to extend that to this. So with that, why don't we hit the VMs real quick for that voice note of the day.
Hey Future, my name is Amanda. I'm calling from Miami, Florida, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the passing of Liam Payne and kind of that parasocial relationship that many people worldwide right now are reckoning with, the loss of this individual who many of us really grew up with as a really important person during our formative years. And I know he went on to do some questionable things, and there have been accusations about his behavior. But like you say, as long as we were here, everything's possible. And so part of me always held out hope that he would get better and he would be able to have a redemption arc for himself. But it's really sad to know he won't. And I'm just wondering how we kind of reconcile that grief with the reality of the things that he might have done as a person.
Yeah. What a really brilliant and beautiful and thoughtful question. I can hear, in your voice that this is a meaningful thing, and that's it. When you get on the internet, it's a topic. It's a topic for folks to sort of weigh in on rather than something very meaningful. I have seen a pretty massive community with the One Direction sort of fandom come up. And yes, I've definitely seen here's a list of what everyone's calling the receipts and the dirty laundry and this and that. And, I can't imagine what it's like to be a teenager and to experience fame at the highest possible levels and the ways that, some of the worst behaviors are enabled. The most intense kind of drugs are freely provided, and the most rampant kinds of abuse happen. I mean, we're hearing it over and over again. kids in industry and how they're treated, and and that doesn't forgive anything that this person might have done. But I do think it's okay for you to love him. I think it's okay for you to still care. I think it's okay for you to remember, and I'm not saying you do, by the way, but to have feelings about this, because it meant something to you, and he meant something to you, and this band meant something to you at a very formative time. And I think that's part of the redemption, right? Is that this story is now for people that do care and that are invested to sort of carry it on and to hold the contradictions and the nuances. And as hard as it is, I'll tell you this, the ugly thing and the beautiful thing about grief is that it doesn't get smaller. We just grow around it. And I think this is an opportunity for anyone and everyone that is grieving to grow, even when the people that we love who do harm can't. We will never know if he was going to have a redemption arc. And I think about that with Jordan Neely too. I know they're not the same. I think that the harm, I'm using air quotes here, that Jordan Neely causes highly contestable and debatable. But it is unbelievably sad when I think people are robbed of their futures, especially young people, because we never know who they're going to be. I mean, who knows? I could have ended up as a Condoleezza Rice, like just another library, just terrorizing the world. But a couple of fluke encounters changed that, I'd like to think. So just thanks for your thoughtfulness, and just sending love out there to you and to everybody else who's sort of grappling with this and, with everything that's happening in this moment. So with that, why don't we hit that end music? Just want to say, y'all, thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. The show really is a labor of love. We have new episodes dropping 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are. The questions are increasing. I want even more. Drop your voicemail questions to jfktodayShow@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. Shout out to Carolyn and KR and the JFK team. And shout out to you, the listeners, that make it all possible. Love you. Peace.